So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can build a basic HTTP server in Node. So this is a first step in backend development with Node, creating a server that can serve up files in response to a request. If you're completely new to Node, then you may want to watch my Getting Started with Node.js video first, where I walk through the installation of Node and setup steps to start working with it also in Visual Studio Code. But assuming you've already set up Node, let's talk about how you can create a HTTP server that can serve up different types of files. Now this server is going to run locally on your computer and you'll be able to access it through a given port. So the first thing we need to do to set up a HTTP server is load the HTTP package into this script. I'm going to save this in a variable called HTTP, and the package itself is called HTTP. Now it's inbuilt in Node, so you don't actually need to download and install it. You already downloaded and installed it when you installed Node. Now on this HTTP package, there is a method called createServer. So this is going to create a server object that I'm going to save in a variable called server. Now what we need to do is configure our server. So the way that we do that is we pass a callback function into createServer, and this has two parameters, rec, which stands for request, and res, which stands for response. And we're going to be able to handle any request that's made to our server through the rec parameter, and any response we handle through the res parameter. So I'm not going to do any complex configuration at the moment. I'm just going to console log request. So this function runs, this callback function, every time a request is made to the server, and I just want to console log the request just to see that it's working. So the next thing I need to specify is the port number on which this server is going to run on my computer. So it's typical to specify the port number as 3000, but the ports around 3000 are generally free, so it could be 3001, something like that, just in case that port is already in use by another application. And the final thing I need to do to get my server up and running is to say server, and there's a method on it called listen, and this is going to get it up and running on the port that I input. So I'm going to input port here. This is going to start the server on port 3001, and I can actually pass in a callback function here. It's completely optional, but it's quite typical to do so because then you can log a message saying that the server's running. So I'm going to say server running on and then port, and so in Node that's going to display this message if the server starts successfully. So believe it or not, this is all the code you need to get a server up and running in Node. Of course, it's not a very complex server. We're only logging the details of any request made to it, but this is the basic framework of how you get a server up and running using Node.js. So I'm going to save that now. The next step is to actually start the server. So in my terminal, I'm in my folder here, Node example, and I need to type, I can either type node script.js, and that's going to start my server, but in the previous video I installed nodemon, and so this is going to update the server each time on save, so this is just a little bit easier than restarting it every time. Okay, so I'm going to use nodemon. I'm going to start Node.js here. And you can see now my message is being displayed, server running on 3001, so that's port 3001. So it should be now ready for me to view in the browser. Now in the browser what I need to do is type localhost, and after a colon I specify the port. So localhost is my computer and the server is up and running on port 3001. So let's see what happens when we try to access it. This is going to take a while because we don't actually end the response in our code. So I'm going to stop that and go back to our server. But what you can see here is that a request was made. So the console log was made, even though the server didn't actually serve up anything. And you can see here, there's a lot of information about the request that's made. But of course, information about the request can be useful if you're creating a login or authentication system. So I just wanted to show you what an incoming request looks like. So I'm going to delete that console log now, and I'm just going to write a response now rather than dealing with the request. So the first thing that you should include when writing a response is provide a status code. So we can use the status code method on the res parameter to do that. And in this case, I'm going to set it to 200 because there is going to be a response. So this request will get a successful response. You may be familiar with the status code 404 not found for pages. 200 means the request was successful. Next, you should specify what kind of response it's going to be, and you can do that by setting a header using the setHeader method. And in here you place two arguments. So the first one is content type. This remains the same. And the second argument varies depending upon what type of content you want to serve up. So in this case, I want to serve up text, and it's going to be plain. So I'm not going to serve up any HTML for now, but I will return to that in a moment and serve up this index.html file we have in the directory. The next part is actually writing the response. So we can use the write method on the response parameter, and I'm going to say hello world. So classic. And I need to remember to end the response. So I do that by calling the end method on the res parameter, and you need to remember to include this or nothing will be sent to the requester. Okay, so I'm going to save that now, and my HTTP server is still up and running because I'm using NodeMon. So once I save it and re-access it, I should see hopefully this hello world text being served up by the server. So it's on localhost 3001, and you can see here that it is now serving up this text to us, hello world. So this is a very simple example of us making a request to the server we've created by accessing port 3001 on localhost and receiving a response, in this case just the text hello world. But we can also serve up other types of files. The one that's most interesting to us probably is HTML. So let's return to the code and see how we would do that. So the first thing we need to do is change the content type. So for HTML, we don't say text plain, we say text HTML. And what I want to do is serve up this index.html file I've got here. So just a simple file with a h1 tag and some paragraphs. Now to get to that, in my Node script, I'm going to need to access the file system so I can get this index.html file. Now, if you watched the previous video, you'll know that there's a package called fs, standing for file system, that's built into Node that we can use. So I'm going to access that now, and I do that in the same way as HTTP. I say fs require fs. So now what I'm going to do is make a request to the file system so I can access the index.html file to serve that up. So the best practice in Node is to use try-catch syntax here. Now in the try statement, what I want to do is make a request to the file system. So I say fs.read file sync. And I want to access index.html, so I pass that in as an argument. And then I want to write that as the response. So I'm going to copy this in here into the try statement, and also the res end. And instead of the hello world, I'm going to pass in the result of this attempt to read the file system, so I'll save that as HTML, and then I'm going to pass in HTML, that's what I want to write now, and then end the request. Now if there's an error, what I want to do is I want to set the status code to 404 to indicate that the page was not found. The next thing I want to do is write a message, so something appears to the user and it's just going to be bad request. I would rather console log the error because that's going to be quite technical. I don't want to bother my user with that. And then finally I need to end the response. So you always need to remember that or nothing will be returned. So let's head back to the server. It's still running because we're using NodeMon. So now it's serving up the HTML file. So the try statement is being executed successfully by the server. And if there's an error, so if I break my code in a way so the try statement no longer works, that should execute the catch statement. So when I do that, you see bad request. And if we go down to the bottom of our output, you can see that there's this reference error, fs read file sync is not defined. So we've got some information about what's gone wrong. Now, if I look at the network and refresh on the network, you'll see that the status code is 404. So that's exactly what we want. We're telling the browser that this is a bad request. And if I add the full stop here again, so that the try statement executes, the status should be 200, meaning successful request. So everything is working as we expect. So that is how you can very easily set up a HTTP server in Node. So this is an important first step in learning backend programming using Node.js. In my next tutorial on Node, I'm going to be showing you how you can set up your own REST API server using Node and a framework, very popular framework called Express. So if you like this video and you'd like to see the next one on REST API server, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can see more content from us in the future.